And the difference between I don't want to do this, let's trust my gut, it knows something I don't know, versus I don't want to do this because this isn't my strike zone and I'm uncomfortable doing it, can be pretty subtle at times. So, the first step is just being aware, right? Just being aware that I don't want to do this. There's a reason I don't want to do this. I don't know what it is yet.
Right.
And then try to kind of look at the situation and like, is there a reason I don't want to do it? Is my gut telling me it's a bad decision? Can I figure out what that bad decision is or why waiting is better? And then if not, is it really just that I don't like playing to my weaknesses?
Right. You have a good point, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the awareness. There's the discernment, which is like a muscle that you practice and you get better at, and it takes way more self-awareness to really dive deep to hold yourself accountable with your own discernment because we're not always right. Sometimes self-sabotage is coming in or our limiting beliefs saying, well, I don't like doing that, so I'm going to procrastinate.
Welcome to the Resilient Minds podcast, stories of grit, growth, and success, where we dive deep into the journey of successful leaders who've struggled and succeeded. Before the wins, before the titles, what was the mindset behind the leader? On this show, we focus on real stories behind the success, the struggles, the resilience, and the courage it takes to keep moving forward, even when times get tough. My goal is to provide you with stories of hope and transformation, showing that no matter the challenges, there is a way forward. On this show, we'll be meeting with highly successful leaders who've battled through obstacles, emerging stronger and wiser on the other side. This show is for anyone who wants to grow, evolve, and find the light at the end of the tunnel. Everyone's a leader, so together, we'll uncover what it truly means to evolve as leaders, and ultimately, as human beings. This is Resilient Minds.
Hey, I'm your host, Dr. Campbell, and I'm here with Andrew Ackerman, and he's a two-time entrepreneur and an expert in corporate innovation. He's here to talk to us about the amazing things that he's doing in the corporate and business world. Thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your time. Go ahead and tell us all the things that you're doing because you have your hands in a lot.
Well, you covered some of the big ones, right? So I've done two startups over the course of my career, and then I started investing in startups. So I've invested in about 71, 72 startups over the past, 2 decades, right? Now I feel old just saying it. Along the way, I picked up a lot of knowledge in the corporate innovation world. So I've been doing that kind of work with large corporates who want to, understand how to actually engage with startups. And if that's not enough, I also teach entrepreneurship because why not? And I like to write. So I've got a bunch of published articles and a book, which hopefully we'll get to later, called The Entrepreneur's Odyssey.
Right. I want to thank you for the work that you're doing with teaching entrepreneurs because I've been self-employed for 15 years and the amount of effort, time,
Mhm.
energy, the money, the tears, that go into startups and the lessons, because if you have a failure, it's not a failure, it's an investment in what you're going to do next, right? So it's a lesson. It's just sometimes they are very, very hard. But you can't just pick up a pamphlet and then all of a sudden read the directions and know how to be an entrepreneur. It really does
Yeah.
need to be taught.
Yeah, it needs to be taught. We have this debate a lot, which I think is a silly debate. Is entrepreneurship like innate or is it taught? Like every skill, like there's certain people who are more naturally inclined to it. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's certain people who just will never get it. For the broad middle, you can kind of learn how to do it. And to your point, you can also learn how to do it in a more healthy way, and you can learn how to do it in a less healthy way.
Right. What I've seen with a lot of individuals, as well as the way that I used to be in the past, because I definitely had to work on that, was people who don't like to give up control and ask for help. So they can't work for a boss. They have to be self-employed, right? And they tend to get very impatient and bored. So they want the
Mhm.
next dopamine hit. So they end up by default being entrepreneurs, but then they can really run themselves into the floor because they're actually creating just as many fires as they are businesses.
Yeah, so there's a happy medium between, F this, I'm not working for you anymore. And realizing that that doesn't mean that you make all the decisions. It doesn't mean that you do everything, right? You have to embrace the flexibility, but also accept the fact that now more things are out of your control rather than fewer.
Right. And it's about, the sacrifices that you are willing to make to have what you want, but also what I would have said before is to try to find a healthy balance, right? But sometimes that's still not true. Before we got on this call, you were telling me that when it comes to a startup, there is the difference between a regular life balance or homework life balance and then having a startup.
Yeah, yes, I'll tell you a funny story, right? Well, I think it's funny. No guarantee that you'll find it funny or the audience. So I also tell dad jokes. There's zero guarantee you'll find any of those funny. So rolling it back, I have a portfolio company. A company's called Cherry. The founder's name is LD. And LD has done this a few times, right? He's done, I think this is his fourth startup. He's had two exits. In fact, I think his exits were bigger than mine, so which is fine. Like I love investing in founders who are arguably at least better founders than I was. So LD has gotten to the point in his company where he's still able to interview everyone who comes to his company to work for his company, but he's like the last person, right? So it's usually a formality by the time you get to him. So he's sitting down with a kid, 23, 24 years old. It might be his first job, might be his second job. And he doesn't know what to say because all the meaningful questions have been done in the past three rounds of interviews. So he says, "So, what's important to you?" And without hesitation, the guy says, really, work-life balance is important to me." And LD says, "I totally understand. I'm going to help you get a job at a company that's better suited to you." And like the guy was like, he's hit by a truck, right? Because he thought that was the end of it. He thought he was in. And all of a sudden he's like, "No jobs." He's like, "What?" And he says, "Listen, I understand how you feel, but that's not how a startup works. You know, a startup is intense, right? There's in the extreme case, you work really hard for 5 years and then you can have like, balance later. I don't subscribe to that extreme point of view. But if you're at a startup, whether it's a tech startup or your own small business, you're doing everything, right? One day you could be working on a high level strategy for your business. The next day you're assembling desks, right? You could be all in. You're sprinting at 110%. And if you don't do that, the startup will fail. But on the other hand, if you don't take breaks, right? Sprint has a beginning and end. If you don't take those breaks and let yourself recharge, you're going to fail, right? You're going to break. So when I talk about work-life balance in the context of a startup, and when I advise founders who are thinking or already in the industry, I say, listen, um, you can't do this like 50-50. It's not like I'm going to be gone at 6 p.m., be home, be with my kids every night. Like that's maybe not the right time to do a startup. You have to think of it as a week or two of intense effort and then just shut the phone off for a day. Okay, I exaggerate. Never shut the phone off. But uh, I'm actually joking. Like you shut the phone off, put it away for a bit, let yourself have that day or two to recharge, and then get back in for the next sprint.
Right. So when you're talking about them needing to sprint and move forward, they still have to take care of themselves. They're not neglecting all those things. You still have to be able to perform. What is a normal or average or recommended self-care regimen schedule? What does that look like for somebody who's still going to be successful because they're still pushing through?
Yeah, so like this is the ultimate, your mileage may vary. It depends a lot on the person, depends a lot on what, part of your life you're in and, what kind of support network you have. So if you're a 27-year-old single person, right? So, and all you have to worry about is like maybe a dog, then you can go out there. You could be working 80 hours, 90-hour weeks, and then just crash on the weekend. You could go for like an hour run, once or twice a week and let that recharge you. You could sit around and take the hour and just watch, Star Trek marathons. I don't know, whatever it takes that mentally and physically recharges you, that may be enough at that point in your life. If you're fast forward 10 years and you got small kids, well, it's really hard to do that unless your partner is able to pick up a lot of that slack. It just may not be possible for you to put that kind of intensity in, and then also be present as a parent to the point where you won't regret it, in 5, 10 years, and your kids will be in therapy. Well, they'll probably be in therapy anyway, but
Mhm.
um, I, you may not be able to do it, right? The numbers might just not add up. Fast forward another 10 years, you got kids in high school. Okay, maybe you can do it. They're a little more independent, right? Or maybe you have a partner who is able to do a lot of the other underpinning. So really it depends on, what kind of person you are, what kind of things you need, the normal level of care at that stage in your life, at that kind of, we'll call it youth for lack of a better word, whatever it works for you, but you have to be aware of this is what I need to be able to come back the next time, get at the starting line for the next sprint, and give it my all again for that next burst.
Well, when you're talking about awareness, and this is something that, myself in the past and that I've seen in many, many business owners, is the impulsiveness, which is the need to move forward, sometimes outweighs their discernment, which is actually something that holds us back, not to hold us back because of fear, but to hold us back because of wisdom and to be aware of what my limitations are, what my reality is, and where is a healthy middle ground for me that I can make sacrifices and be comfortable with that. Because then we have to prioritize,
Mhm.
or what is outside of our limitations, and maybe it's not the right time. So the ability to let go and detach.
Yeah, so you can think of it a little bit as a budget, right? You want to use it as a budget. You could also think of it as like, troops in a battle, right? You can't be all deployed all the time. You can't be spending all the time. There are times where you have to kind of sit back and let things replenish. So you'll know what your budget is. You'll know what the total number of troops you have at your disposal. Pick whatever analogy you want. And you just have to be very cognizant of like, I need this time to recoup, to rearm. Now, how exactly you do that is up to you, right? Again, some people go for a run, some people go out for a drink with friends, whatever it takes. But, and I think this comes with wisdom. After a while, you become a little better at understanding when you're running low. You become a little better at looking forward and saying, that's going to be an uphill stretch. I'm going to need to preserve some energy for that. So you kind of look ahead. You're a little strategic about when you deploy these reserves and when you kind of hold back. That's the kind of thinking you have to do. You have to embed it. You have to embed it in certain tasks. So to give a very tactical example, uh, in my world, when you're dealing with like tech startups as opposed to like individuals who are like becoming their own consultant or what have you, tech startups regularly have to raise money, right? And that's every 18, 24 months, you're back at the well talking to investors.
Mhm.
And to do that, it's actually a very time-consuming process. But even the very beginning of it, it has three main steps, all of which are mind-numbingly boring and repetitive. And I haven't been able to use AI to really whittle away at too much. And then you got to figure out, I need 100+ investors who are relevant to my startup that I might want to approach even before you go near them,
Mhm.
right? Otherwise, you don't have enough people in the top of your funnel to really have a successful round. Number two, you need to figure out who can give you warm intros to it. As you're going through LinkedIn, figuring out, oh, Jacqueline can introduce me to, you know, Dave Coates of Correlation Ventures. And then three, you got to start sending them out and regularly following up to make sure that, the people who get the emails actually respond, yes, I'll make that intro. I did make the intro, and so on. Each one of these is like a 2 to 4 hour task. So when
Mhm.
I give my speech on how to do it, I tell people, listen, when you're done making your list, like close your computer, go out, get a drink with a friend, go for a run, do whatever you need to recharge. Come back the next day. And you're going to spend 2 to 4 hours just banging out the email. Figure out who can make the intros. Then do the same thing. And then the next day, you're going to come back and bang out those emails. So you got to build that into your process.
Right. Which takes a lot of discipline too and accountability. Because if you mess it up,
Mhm.
you have to go back, reevaluate, and then implement something that is going to work better, but you have to hold yourself accountable to do that. One thing that I find when I'm working with individuals is when they have this cognitive block, limiting belief, or impulsive behavior, whatever it is that's controlling them, when we work on it, it usually has a feeder back in childhood, early
Yeah.
adulthood, adolescent, maybe even an earlier marriage, but it's usually our wounds or traumas or attachment issues those things that we have to work on to be better presently. Do you have something personally that's come up for you, maybe a behavior or a thought process, something that's been very pivotal in your transformational journey to help you get to where you are at success?
Hmm. You're assuming a level of self-awareness here that I may not have. I had a fairly uneventful childhood that way, so I don't have any traumas, but I have noticed a couple of behaviors uh, in myself that uh, there's kind of subtle differences between them. And one is very healthy and one is unhealthy. And I have to work very hard to, figure out which is which. So there are some times where you will avoid a certain task
Mm.
intuitively. I don't want to do it now, I'll do it later. Or you have trouble getting started with something. And sometimes it's actually your subconscious very wisely telling you that this is not the best use of your time right now.
Mm.
It might be like, here's a task that, it's better that you wait and see, what happens in certain events before you go out there and maybe spin your wheels. Now, there are other times where it's you just not wanting to do something you're not good at.
Right.
And the difference between, I don't want to do this, let's trust my gut, it knows something I don't know, versus I don't want to do this because this isn't my strike zone and I'm uncomfortable doing it, can be pretty subtle at times. So, the first step is just being aware, right? Just being aware. I don't want to do this. There's a reason I don't want to do this. I don't know what it is yet.
Right.
And then try to kind of look at the situation and like, is there a reason I don't want to do it? Is my gut telling me it's a bad decision? Can I figure out what that bad decision is or why waiting is better? And then if not, is it really just that I don't like playing to my weaknesses?
Right. You have a good point, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier with the awareness. There's the discernment, which is like a muscle that you practice and you get better at, and it takes way more self-awareness to really dive deep to hold yourself accountable with your own discernment because we're not always right. Sometimes self-sabotage is coming in or our limiting beliefs saying, well, I don't like doing that, so I'm going to procrastinate. And then I'm going to play victim and say, oh, well, I failed because I wasn't good at that, or nobody did that, or I didn't have any help
Mm-hmm.
because you pushed it off for so many times and you didn't learn it. But sometimes it's our intuition, like you're saying, no, I need to be spending my time on X, Y, and Z. But the only way we know how to do that is by calling it out.
So I'll share another one which I see a lot in the startup world. Uh, I even see it with my wife, which I can only say because she's not in the room right now. But it actually springs from a strength. So my wife is infinitely better at than I am at keeping a lot of details up in her head. Like she knows what the schedule's like. She remembers exactly like which appointment she has to go to in what order and what her follow-ups are. She knows exactly like, which kid's seeing which doctor when. Like me, I have to have a calendar. My calendar looks like the pride flag. I've got everything color coded. It's the only way I don't drop the ball on things. But Julie's quite good at it. And a lot of the founders, especially the early stages, are very strong intuitively at that kind of thing. The problem is twofold. Number one, you hit a wall, right? No matter how good you are at it, at some point, the volume just overwhelms you and things will slip through the cracks. And if you've been very, very good at just juggling 10 balls, and then now you have 12 and you're going to drop them, right? At some point, you just can't add another ball to that. And you've never built the skills to change it from just your natural ability to a process, right? You have to change it to a process to be able to scale it beyond what you're inherently able to do. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is if it's just something that you do very well, then it's hard for you to bring somebody else on to take some of that off your hands, right? To be able to give somebody else some of the balls and let them run with it, even if they're not as good as you, right? It doesn't matter. At least they're, three balls that you're not juggling anymore. But to do that, you need to have figured out the process. That's something that's explicit rather than just all up here. And that's something that you can share with other people. It's visible to other people and it lets them give you back time. But if you're very, very good at doing this all kind of intuitively, you don't learn how to make this an explicit process. So you, A, can't get better at it, can't scale, B, and C, can't bring somebody else in to help you out.
Right. And again, I think this pretty much this whole conversation today has been self-awareness, discernment, and making good choices, right? Which is
Yeah.
based in reality too. Like you can't, sometimes you can't push through and just make something happen. Sometimes you need to slow down to evaluate, and then you need to push through when it's the opportune time, but that takes discernment too.
Yeah. And the instinct is always, I'll just step my game up a little bit and get through this rough patch.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's the right answer, but again, there's a limit. So I agree 1,000%. Like, the number one step is to realize you're doing it.
Right.
Right? When you're gearing up just for a burst, like recognize that feeling and ask yourself, is that really what I should be doing? Right. And if I'm doing these bursts so often, at some point I should be like, maybe I shouldn't be bursting. Maybe I should, be offloading. Or, maybe I recognize that I'm putting this off, but is this kind of a smart procrastination or just the garden variety bad? Like you have to start off by being aware of it, or else you can't even get to step two.
Absolutely. What is something specific that you use when you have to disconnect? Maybe you turn off your phone and you go away and you go do something, right, to decompress your body and your
Uh,
mind. What helps for you?
So I have a cheat. Um, I'm not sure it'll work for everybody. And I think statistically it works for about 1.1%, like 1/10 of 1% of the world population. So I
Well,
happen to be I happen to be Jewish, so I observe Sabbath. So for me, and since I'm fairly traditional about it, I unplug. So for those technically 25 hours, my phone is off, my computer is off, my TV is off. Right? So it purposefully creates a space where it's just me hanging out with my insanely bored children, or going to services, or having meals with friends who come over, whatever it might be. I mean, I grew up playing a lot of board games on Saturdays, and that was fine too. There may still be a movement actually in the tech world called Tech Shabbat. Started about 10, 15 years ago. Um, Blanking on the woman's name who I think started it. She was also Jewish, not particularly traditional, but she noticed that like having that time to unplug made a huge difference. So people just started saying, for these 24 hours, I'm going to go electronics free. And it really does make a difference. There is a qualitative difference between taking 24 hours away from your device in like half-hour chunks versus taking a contiguous block off. It's a little bit like, you don't get hungry if like, you're not eating 80% of the time, but you're having snacks every hour.
right.
There's a cleansing element to it that you only get if you do it in these kind of, I guess these are the inverse of a sprint, these anti-sprints.
Well, it's a longer chunk of time because you have to go through the detox portion of it. I call it a digital detox.
Yeah.
Normally turn my phone off, Monday through Friday as best I can at 5 p.m. And to hold myself accountable, I announce it to my kids, like, Mom's phone is off. And they're like, why are you telling us? I'm like, it's not for you. It's for
Yeah.
me.
You're burning your bridge. You want them to mock you if you bring. That's fine. That's one of the techniques that works really well. The saying they have is like, how do you win? You know what a game of chicken is, right?
The game of chicken.
Oh, so the chicken used to be like is a horrible idea. They used to like two guys would drive at each other in cars, and the first person to flinch and turn away loses.
Yeah.
Right. So in theory, if they tie for a win, they're both dead. So it's a silly game. But the riddle, whatever the story is, like, how do you win at chicken? And the answer is you take your steering wheel off and you throw it out the window. So once the other driver sees that you can't steer, they have to swerve,
Right.
which is actually an interesting application of game theory, but we won't go there. But what you're doing is you're taking your steering wheel off. You want everyone to see, like, listen, it's gone. I can't turn at this point because otherwise my kids will point out that I'm not living up to what I said.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's during the week to make sure that I am able to decompress at the end of the day and sleep well that night. But then on Sunday, like you had said, it's something that I have to do for 24 hours. And I recognize when I'm not grounded, that I'm constantly wanting to go to a screen more. And it's usually our nervous system wanting to continue to run instead of decompressing. So it's
Interesting.
of holding ourselves accountable. It's recognizing.
Interesting.
So
Yeah, I don't get the whole evening that way. I mean, I'm lucky to get like a half-hour meal with the family with the phones down, and even that's a bit of a struggle.
ah, well, I would love to dive into that actually. Maybe you and I can talk about that after we hop off. Here we go.
I have zero practical advice to give you on that. Whatever you're doing better.
That's my field, no worries. Before we hop off today, though, can you tell us what the Entrepreneur's Odyssey is? This is your new book, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the book came out in May. It's called The Entrepreneur's Odyssey. Because I'm a big fan of puns, the subtitle is It's a Novel Guide for Startup Success. So what I mean by that is, uh, there are a lot of books out there that supposedly tell you how to build a startup. Some of them are actually pretty good. A lot of them not so good, but they're all kind of how-to guide, kind of textbook-y, often ghostwritten by, I think, the same dude in the Midwest with the same kind of like anecdote, 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 name drop, name drop, name drop, one-page summary at the end with like 5 bullet points. And you know what? If you ripped out that last page of every chapter and stapled it together, you would have a solid 20-page PowerPoint. And I can't read that. I find it mind-numbingly boring. And also, I don't think it's a good way to remember things. So what I did, and this came over a period of almost 20 years of advising startups in an accelerator setting, where I was running this accelerator program, or just individually with my investments, is I found that when I said, "Hey, Jacqueline, listen, I think that you really need to test what your cost to customer acquisition is." Because if your customer acquisition is too high, this entire business model falls apart. Like I could give that advice and startups would mostly listen. But when instead I told them a story about another startup that was in a similar place. So I said, "Hey, Jacqueline, listen, there was this company that was in one of our earlier accelerator programs. And they had this freemium business model where they needed a certain percentage of people to convert from the free to the premium, about 2%. And if they had 2%, they were golden and the business model worked. If they had below, it didn't work and it wasn't going to happen. Problem was they hadn't built the premium features yet. So their plan was to build it. And then when demo day, when they get to present to the potential investors came out, they would have been just about done and they'll be able to unroll it. And they'll say like, here's what we got. And we said, well, what happens if it doesn't work? It'll be a week before demo day with a model that doesn't work. Like, oh, that's a good question. So we said, why don't you guys put that page up now? Why don't you put the page up with like, here's what you get for free. Here's what you pay for. Here's how much it is. And there's a buy now button. And just, people click it, just, coming soon, right? Get on our emailing list, right? Whatever it is, it doesn't have to do anything. But your goal is to figure out how many people click that button, because that is good data that will tell you what your ultimate conversion rate will be. I lose a few people when they get the credit card, but that's pretty good numbers. At least figure out, like, are you directionally correct? And they did it. They come back the next week and they're like, we have a big problem. We're nowhere near 2%. We're at like 0.1, 0.2%. Like there's no amount of optimization that's going to get us to where we need to be. So we don't think this is going to work, but we have an idea. We want to pivot. We want to do this other thing. It builds on part of what we've done before. Is that okay? And we said, sure. And over the next 6 or 7 weeks, they rebuilt their site entirely to do something different, and they launched it. And that company is SeatGeek, and they're $1 billion company plus. And they would have been dead on demo day had they not tested, quickly and cheaply the way we recommended mid-program. So, it took a lot longer to do it the second way, but it's a heck of a lot more impactful. Like people remember stories, they identify with the founders, they identify what's happening in the founder's mind, and they take that advice. So I ended up writing an entire book around a fictional startup, from soup to nuts, from idea all the way through to funding, and all the stories, all the advice that I would give to these founders over the course of their journey, I embedded in stories within that novel. And that was my way of getting the advice out in a more memorable, hopefully more entertaining but definitely a more effective way.
I love that. So it's a spin-off, the Odyssey.
Yeah, there's a lot of puns, right? And if for those of you who are looking, watching this rather than listening to it, like the cover has a picture of a maze, and the hero is in front of the maze with a chainsaw hacking his way through. So, there's a lot of that in there too, because hey, images and puns tend to stick in our mind.
They do, and images are so empowering, or I'm sorry, powerful,
Mhm.
because our brain learns that way. It has to have the image, which is actually the right hemisphere, and then the words, which is the description of the story, the logic, which is the left hemisphere, right? But we need both. So I
Yeah.
love how you've been able to capture that.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm not going to take credit for this, and I'm certainly not comparing my book to this. But if you think about it, that's also why every religion known to man starts with a Genesis story
Mm,
rather than, hey, Jacqueline, here are the 20 things you can't do,
yeah,
right? They all start with colorful stories with relatable characters to take these lessons and bring them to life for us. It's just a more, I mean, it's just a more effective way to get like real change.
absolutely. Well, it speaks a lot to your journey as an entrepreneur and what gives you the credibility to be able to teach them now and to be able to find the right ones to be able to invest in, right? Because you've been through it. So I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Have a good one.
Thank you so much for joining. Your time and your focus are your most valuable currencies, so thank you for giving that to us today. Our guest contact information will be in the description below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. But please, if you know someone who's struggling, stop right now and send this video to them. The struggle behind growth and success is real, and they need the support to make it, because the strongest minds are the ones that healed. So don't forget, lead louder, feel deeper, and stay resilient. Until next time, this is your host, Dr. Campbell, on the Resilient Minds podcast.